I haven't done a Facebook Live for a long time. I sure hope it's working. I'm not 100% sure. I think it's working now. I hope so. But clearly, I haven't done a Facebook Live for a while. And since the events at the Capitol this past week and the events of this past year, I have had about 5 or 6 different blog posts that I wanted to write that were all coming from my heart. Not having any answers, having lots of questions, having some real awarenesses, and a powerful message to share to myself, but also to those of you in my world. And in my world, we're always in a conversation about scarcity and abundance. Not abundance that is, how much money we have, and that measures abundance by our quantity of money or things or accomplishments or things like that. Not that common understanding of abundance in our society, but abundance that has us know in our souls, in ourselves, that we are part of something bigger than us and our individual efforts and lives. And despite what it oftentimes appears, this week being a good example, that something bigger than us is ultimately loving, powerful, generous, creative, resourceful, intelligent, and eternal. It's infinite. There's no limit. And in that being part of something bigger than us, which oftentimes refers to, I'm referring to God, this universe spirit. It's also, we're part of something bigger than us, as in the human family that's bigger than us, and our individual lives. And that in that connection to something bigger, human family and the divine, we're here in this world with a purpose, which is to allow that divine abundance, that divine lovingness, that divine creativity, that divine generosity, that divine resourcefulness, to allow it to flow into and flow through us, so that this world more reflects the one who created this world and who created you and me. It's like the flow of oxygen. The oxygen is always there. We can hold our breath and not let it in, but the oxygen is still there available to us. We can hold on to our breath out of fear that there won't be oxygen for us in the next moment, but the oxygen is still there. We just don't let ourselves experience it. And the one who created this universe, this something bigger that we're part of, designed things inherent in nature, that the resources we all need to fully live the unique purpose we were created to live, to be the fullest expression of who we were created to be, a unique expression of this divine, it's available. But it's the scarcity and the belief in scarcity in us that blocks it. Either we won't let in what's available, or we won't let out what really doesn't serve life in us. And so if you think about it in terms of oxygen, we inhale the oxygen that gives us life. And our bodies, thank God, know how to utilize that and diffuse it through our bodies so we're still alive and our bodies are functioning and healthy. And then we release the excess, the carbon dioxide we don't need, that doesn't give us life, but it does give life to the plants and trees in the world around us. And then those plants and trees, yay, they release oxygen that we can breathe. That's the flow of abundance. We didn't create the oxygen, but we do play a role in experiencing the life that it offers us and in sharing it, letting it flow through us so that others can experience life. So that's just a backdrop of the world I live in, the conversation I'm always engaged in, that my clients come to me to deep dive in. And then we have the events of this past week, and with them, the events of this whole past year. You know, the pandemic, George Floyd. This is not a political post, but the presidency of, President Donald Trump and the impact, how he has led or not led, whatever your opinion is, has had on our country and our world. Now, my opinion is it's created more scarcity. It has not been a leadership of we are part of something bigger. And so we use what we need and we let it flow out so that everyone participates in and has access to all that's available. That's my opinion. It's a pretty strong one, and you can have a different one. And I still think this message that I'm just like impromptu, and it really is impromptu because what I've been talking about so far has not been what I planned on talking about. So now let's get into, in that context, what I've been wrestling with, reflecting on, and starting 4 or 5 blog posts around, maybe just talking it through with you. By the way, thanks for listening. Might help me clarify so I can write it. So, a couple of quick vignettes from my life. When I was in first grade, I was a redhead, freckle-faced first grader. I remember my teacher, Sister Cadgeton, Catholic school, asking one day in late September, I think, maybe early October, girls, all the girls in my class went, how many of you have a witch costume? She had proceeded to say that we were going to do a Halloween play as a class. And then she asked, so we're going to need a witch. So girls, how many of you have a witch costume? I didn't have a witch costume. So I didn't raise my hand. But then I looked around and it seemed like every other girl's hand in my class was raised. And I felt different. I felt less than. So in the way I was thinking then, I'm thinking, I want to feel like I belong. I want to feel like I'm like them. I want to feel like I'm like others. So I raised my hand. I figured I was safe because you don't have freckle-faced witches. So there's no way Sister Cadgeton would call on me and everybody else would think I had a witch costume too. The only problem was I was also Sister Cadgeton's pet, so she did call on me. So I was caught in a lie. A lie I told, I knew it was wrong. I thought I could get away with it. But I told it because I had this need of wanting to feel like I belonged, wanting to feel like I fit in, wanting to feel like others, like the others in my class. Many of you have heard the story of me in third grade when I was so excited to be a campfire girl and my mom said I couldn't because our house wasn't good enough for all the other campfire girls to come to for some of the meetings. I didn't understand. But again, I was feeling like I didn't belong, like something was wrong with me, that I was less than because I didn't have a nice house, didn't have a witch costume. Early on, I started to develop a belief about myself based on what I saw around me, based on how people responded to me, based on what other people had or did. That somehow something was wrong with me. I was less than. I was not enough. I wasn't important. I didn't matter. Maybe you can relate to some of these. They're like deep wounds. Now, maybe you're like, no, that's not true of me, because I tried to do that too. And I've spent a lot of my life creating an image, a facade, didn't even know it, trying to prove how enough I was, prove that I do belong, prove that I am important, so that I didn't have to experience the pain of it. Now, I could go on, but why I'm sharing all of this with you in light of the events of this past week, I am not condoning the behavior. I am not condoning the breaking of the law. I am not condoning the politics. I am definitely not condoning white supremacy. Like that's not part of my vision for our world, for why we are here on this earth. But I could look at everything that happened and the actions of people this week and over the past year, and I could see the underlying wound that could drive it. I could see how an unhealed, inaccurate belief that in any one of those people, that they're not enough, they don't belong, they're less than, could drive, gone to extreme, could drive the type of behavior we've seen. Again, not to condone it, but to see beyond the behavior, and with more compassion for ourselves and others, less judgment, see what's really going on. There's a lot of conversation going on right now. There's also a lot of judgment going on right now on both sides. There's a lot of conversation about, like, what are we going to do to punish these people? Should President Trump be impeached and all of that? That's a conversation that needs to be had. But it's also a conversation that just addresses the behaviors, not the underlying causes. Not the underlying causes. And those underlying causes are all going to go back, I believe, to an inaccurate belief for everyone involved, somehow, that they're not enough. And so, what do we all do when we feel pain? We look for ways to not feel pain. If we don't feel important, we're going to look for ways we can make ourselves important. If we feel like we don't belong, we're going to find a place we do belong. If we feel like we're powerless, we're going to look for a way to have power, or what we think is power. That's the underlying scarcity. And we can impeach Trump, and we can arrest the thugs who broke down the Capitol. We can do all of that. And those people will be, they'll get the consequences of their action. But when we do that, and then we go through saying, oh, all better, Those bad guys, those people, they got their consequences. That's how it should be. I can just keep going my life like, oh, okay, doesn't affect me, doesn't apply to me. That's the lie. That's the lie. Because you may look at some of the people who did that, you may look at the president, and like, you could feel your blood boil. You could hate them. But here's the thing. You've got so do I. We've got unhealed wounds too. We've got ways that we participate and reinforce this belief in scarcity and our own and each other's in the world. And so we address the surface stuff and don't address the underlying cause. One of the questions going on this week is, how could we let this happen? And a lot of that is like, how did the Capitol get breached? And again, that's a valid question, but that's a surface question. How could this have happened? What are we missing individually? What's the truth we're not experiencing individually? What's missing for the individual, the other members of our human family, that behavior would be what they would engage in to somehow have unmet, valid needs met, to be loved, or at least feel loved, to feel accepted, to belong, to feel important, to feel powerful. My questions are, what's the work I can do? What's the work you can do in me and in our world to have those needs met? For white supremacists and for people of color. For white people with white privilege and for people who have never experienced privilege. Because we're all connected, my friends. We're all connected. In my spiritual tradition, Christianity, Jesus talked about, don't try and get the splinter out of somebody else's eye until you've addressed the beam in your own. I hated that verse. I hated that verse growing up because it challenges us. Because it's real easy, especially this week, to see the splinters or the beams in other people's eyes. And to use that as a distraction from seeing the shadows in us, seeing the wounds in us, seeing the places where we're still believing in and operating from scarcity in terms of ourself, that we won't let in what's available for us and what gives us life, because we think we're not worthy or don't deserve it, or we will hold on to it thinking, I could just have more and more and more, because more doesn't make you enough, because the premise that you're not enough is false. That's why redefining abundance to be a collective experience, not an individual experience, and to not have us be the source of it, but the participants in it, the receivers and the givers in it, is so important. And we cannot do that when we judge ourselves and when we judge others. When we try and hide those parts in ourselves, hide those needs, do not get them met, nor do we participate in helping them be met in others. And underneath it all, where this scarcity plays out across the board, is in the arena where I dive in. I teach what I best need to learn and practice myself. It's around money. We think money gives us power. We think money gives us security. We think money makes us important. We think that the more money we have. But the problem is, for so many of us, out of our scarcity, thinking that those externals, that power, that external somehow makes us enough because we're still buying into the wound, then we try and accumulate more and more and more, thinking that will somehow feed us, meet that unmet need, fill that hole. But in our doing that, we create less for others. We create less for others. And in that experience of less, having less access to jobs, less access to resources, less access, in the pandemic to money to pay your bills, and the access to less opportunity, less education, less food, less this. You know what? Those unmet needs, even being recognized and respected, are eventually gonna flare up in anger, in judgment, in retaliation. And then that pain is going to create more pain in the world. I don't have answers. And I don't even think answers is the point. I think starting to see it through different eyes is the point. To go from the me and my money and my abundance to our money, our abundance, my resources, my life, to our life, realizing that we're part of the our. We're part of the human family. And us having less than what we need doesn't help anybody. If I'm over here holding my breath, refusing to breathe it in because I think if I breathe in the oxygen I need, you're going to have less, that's not helping you, it's not helping me. I guess bottom line, my ramblings, my musing, and if you don't believe this was unscripted, I don't know what to tell you. The events of this past week and this past year have inspired me all the more to do the spiritual work I need to do to remember the truth of who I am as a unique expression of a divine creator source of life that is loving, generous, creative, resourceful, compassionate, all those words, to do the work I need to do to reconnect with that truth that's always been there in me, despite the experiences in life I've had, despite the mistakes I've made, despite the beliefs I've created or have had reinforced by others around me. To do the work of going inside and reconnecting with the truth of who I am and showing up in the world more like that, from that place, than my wounded place. Now, in the process of doing that, I have to feel a lot of shit I don't want to feel. Sometimes. And so might you. And not just to do that like, oh, I'm off on my mountaintop doing my connecting to myself, work. No. To do that and then bring that to how I use the life-giving resources that I receive. Not just for me, but how do I share them? How do I share? How do I receive the money that allows me to live and meets my needs, and not just my physical needs, but emotional, mental, spiritual needs? But how also am I willing to share it? Trusting, not share it to get more, but trusting that that's part of who I am. And that in sharing it, in exhaling, I can trust, I will trust that I'll have what I need in the next moment. Sharing those life-giving resources is in sharing my talents, in sharing my messages, in sharing my reflections, in showing up as I am, and daring to do so, not in the secrecy of getting it perfect, which is kind of what was happening with the blog post. I was waiting to say anything about all of these events and what's swirling in me until I had it all figured out. I don't have it all figured out. I don't think figured out is a place we can ever get to and really evolve fully, spiritually, into the fullest human beings we can be. We're always in the question and in the learning. I'm just seeing. So in closing, I know that the event, one other thing I got. Here's my other rambling. I agree with the what we saw happening to the Capitol building, which is the symbol of this democracy and the ideals that America stands for, even if we all know we fall short of living them collectively and individually. And so to see it desecrated, to see it not respected, that hurts. That's painful. I get that. But my other reflection is, what if our democracy wasn't symbolized only by a building or even a piece of paper called a constitution? What if the biggest symbol of our democracy and the American ideals was the people of America and the lives they lived, and how we as a community embrace the oneness that we profess to and support each other? How we come together and honor and respect everyone and do our best to make sure everyone has access to all that they need, not just physically, but so that their human needs of being loved and belonging and respected and accepted and supported. Like, wouldn't that be an even more powerful testament to democracy? That we're not so polarized, them and they, but we recognize that we're an us, and what I do has an impact on somebody else, and what they do has an impact on me. And let's make a point. What we're doing is creating an impact for all that uplifts and bless all. What if we got as upset and committed to changing things when we see innocent people starving, hungry, beaten by police, killed, murdered? That's as much a desecration of our democracy. What happened to George Floyd? What happened to Ahmaud Arbery? The differences that have been talked about this week about how, the Capitol Police sure responded to mostly white protesters than they would have for a Black Lives Matter. And we have evidence to see there's a big difference. That, our behaviors and how we treat each other and how we treat ourselves and what we believe to be true about ourselves and each other, that we are all unique expressions of the divine source of life who created this planet in all its diversity and in all its abundance and in all of its uniqueness. What if respecting and honoring and supporting the life for all of us, what if that was our capital? What if that was our symbol of democracy? Now, I'm not pie in the sky Pollyanna. I know that that's probably not going to happen in my lifetime. But what if that was what I strove for? What if that's what I protested for? What if that's what I I championed. What if that's what I stood for? And what if you did too? I end with a quote that is hung on my office wall for 21 years now. It's a quote I'm sure you've heard before, but it's been kind of wandering through all my reflections this past week. It's a quote by Gandhi. You must be the change you wish to see in the world. Notice it doesn't have the emphasis be on changing other people or even changing the world. The first movement is to be that for ourselves and in ourselves. And in the process of becoming that, striving for that, healing our own wounds, reclaiming the truth of who and whose we are, in that, we will change the world. We'll change our world, and we'll change our world. And that's my prayer. That together, you and I, in finding the pathway out of the scarcity, inner and external, that this world is driven by and built upon, that we can say yes to the abundance that we've always been a part of, and that has always been part of us. I would love to hear anything that jumped at you. I hope my reflections and ramblings in some way supported you, challenged you, inspired you, gave you direction. Blessings on your day.